Hi everybody. So Wednesday, it's almost 80 degrees here in central Kentucky. Pretty warm. Someone asked me about maintenance on the Garden Railway. I talked about snow and twigs, stuff like that, but I forgot about the Bradford pear petals. So we've got a Cleveland pear here, and the neighbors have a Bradford pear there. So apart from cleaning up leaves in the wintertime, these things don't really hurt anything. I don't clean them up. The only place I really clean them up is in the pond. So, like, I'm going to scoop all those out of there because I'll clog up the filter. Thing I showed you the other day that I had to trim to run the upper loop. Blooms have popped out. Really pretty. I may have to trim it again, but I'm not going to run the upper loop today. Yeah, I might have to trim it if I was going to run the upper loop. What I'm going to do today, got an appointment here in a little bit, but I'm going to run a coal train out here, and I'm going to use my Aristocraft RS3 Interstate Railroad. And I'll talk a little bit about the Interstate Railroad coming up. These cars are Pico cars, and they're a dead ringer for the cars that the Interstate had. They had a whole fleet of these 70 or 50-ton hoppers, and they made a lot of money per diem. So they would travel all over the country. So I had 10 sets of decals made, so I've painted and decaled those. So those decals, let's see, on this side, I think there's one. The Interstate is 4 separate decals. I think there's 5, 6, 7, I think there's 8 decals on each side. And I've got 7 cars like that. I've got enough decals for 3 more. That's a caboose. Of course, no one makes a caboose close to what Interstate had, but this is the closest one I could find. They had a couple older cabooses, like number 10 and 11. So I painted that one up for that. I weather everything in G-scale. Some people don't do it. Some people don't weather, and I'll show you a picture in a book about how I chose to weather that this heavy. Typically they kept their engines fairly clean. It was unusual for them to get that dirty, but had a picture sort of inspired me a little bit. So I get back to my appointment. I'll switch out the coal mine. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, so I got to put all this stuff up tonight. Okay, here we go. The RS3, I'm not sure what type of sound system it has in it, but it doesn't sound as good as the GP9. Okay, we're going to switch to coal mine. So there's no runaround here, so we're going to have to run up to the Truett Lumber to run around the train. So we'll run a couple laps and then we'll run around the train and head back. Okay, we're going to do just like we did on the other train. We're going to leave the caboose on the main, run around, then we'll come back and get the caboose to tack onto the end of the train. Okay, I've got the turnouts line to come into the yard. I'm going to put everything up. Supposed to have pretty heavy rain tomorrow, so I'm going to put everything away. Okay, I have all my cars coupled together. That's how I put them away. So I've cleaned all the pedals off of them. I've got my bridge in place into the shed. Yeah, and I could use my engine to push them in there. But I generally just push them in until I can grab the first car. And I'll go in the shed and I'll show you what I do. Okay, here's my shed. Here's how I keep my cars. I always say if I ever wanted to expand, I could go out the side of the shed. You know, I could curve this table and go out the side of the shed and go up the yard that way. But maybe I'll do that someday, maybe I won't. So anyhow, I just roll my cars in like this. And I just take them off one at a time and put them up on the shelves. So that's how I store them. One thing while we're looking at this Interstate car, they're almost dead ringers for the Interstate coal cars, and I'll show you a picture of a real one. But these Pico cars have no brake detail at all. There's no brake wheel, no fake brakes at all. So that's one thing that sort of bothers me a little bit, but they're really inexpensive, and again, I don't really worry about fragile stuff in the garden, because I'm going to be picking these cars up and handling them a lot, and so I just don't sweat it. I just enjoy the trains in the garden more. I try to weather them, make them look pretty real for the setting they're in, but you know, I'm not going to worry about little tiny details like that. Okay, I've got the bridge out of the way. I keep that in the shed up in the rafters. I just take my cover, snap it on. Be back to N-scale this weekend. Everybody be safe. But wait, there's more. These Aristocrat engines, whether they're battery or track power, they have this access hatch in them. I'm charging it right now, but I filmed that whole thing and never noticed this access hatch was not snapped in. So sharp-eyed people may see that. Apologize about that. Sometimes you're so focused on just filming the scenes that you don't notice stuff right in front of you. We'll talk a little bit about the Interstate for a minute, though you're probably not familiar with it. There are two really cool books about it. Interstate Railroad, History of the Appalachian Coal Road. They're both by Ed Wolfe. Hugh Wolfe is Ed Wolfe's father, and he worked for the railroad for a long time. This is the history of the railroad, has like the roster shots of all the engines, that kind of stuff. This one is about the operations of the railroad. So if you want to know how to operate coal trains and things like that, I recommend this one. But I wouldn't trade either one of them. I'm going to find a couple of pictures in here to show you, and then we'll call it a wrap. So this picture of Interstate 12, my caboose is Interstate number 10. It was the same model of caboose made in 1923. But when the Southern took over the railroad in 1963, they overhauled the cabooses and they put marine board wooden sides instead of like the siding like this. So I'm obviously modeling it, the caboose the way it looked before then. But I don't really have an era that I'm doing for the Interstate. It's just something I enjoy running. And this picture is sort of what inspired me to weather that engine like I did. You can see 35 is just the front of it's in there, and so I sort of basically I just took black spray paint and I just stood above it and just misted it down onto the top of it, because that's where the coal dust would settle on it. So again, that's generally they kept their engines pretty neat, but these were pretty grimy at this time. This is just another picture from the book showing typical Interstate coal cars. You can see the Pico cars are a great match. These books have tons and tons of pictures. A couple of my favorite railroad books for sure. So again, one of the bright spots for me anyhow is all these track diagrams for the places and descriptions of how they used to switch everything. Interstate got, gosh, 90% of their revenue, if not more, from coal. And they had some coke too, but they had to mine the coal and turn it into coke. They had a few sawmills here and there, but hardly had any revenue equipment that wasn't coal cars, basically. It's a really interesting railroad, really fantastic scenery. It's in the southwest corner of Virginia. I think it doesn't get the notoriety of like the Clinchfield because it never had through freights. The Clinchfield connected on the north to the C&O and went down south, and so they had manifest trains and everything, and the Interstate was almost basically all coal. But I really recommend these books if you're interested in learning how coal operations work on the railroad. So I think that's it for now. So everybody stay safe.